In any place where the dead are kept, there are rules that go far beyond bleach and steel. Everyone learns them quickly, though many will never say them aloud. The first is simple. Never take the dead home with you. Not their belongings, not a lock of hair, not their stories. Leave everything where it belongs. The second is harder, but just as vital. Treat the dead with respect. You don't know who they were, what they did or failed to do, what kindness or cruelty shaped their last hours, or whether anyone will ever claim them by name. And the third is a quiet piece of self-defense. If the room turns strange, if the air feels wrong or the shadows press in, step away. There will be other bodies, other shifts. There's only one you. For outsiders, tales from the morgue are often dismissed as myths, the residue of long nights and fluorescent lights, urban legends born from fatigue and the brain's need to stitch noise into meaning. For insiders, science is the first shield. Death, they remind you, is not a switch, but a process. After the pulse stops, the body does not become an object all at once. Bacteria in the gut keep working. Gases build, sphincters relax. Fluids escape. A chest might release a soft sigh when pressure pushes air through a throat that still holds a trace of breath. In rare cases, the spinal cord keeps a reflex or two on a dimmer switch after the brain has gone dark. Fingers can twitch. Toes can curl. Eyelids might flutter. Very rarely an arm may lift toward the chest and settle again. The living jump. The dead do not notice. It is all biology. It is all explainable. There are also things that are not, or at least things that refuse to be explained cleanly, the way a good report closes with a signature and a date. The building in Mexico City was new once, a point of pride. Drawers that hummed cold, tiled rooms for preparation, a hall of identification with glass and light where families stared at faces and decided whether to say a name. The year the story begins, 1963. Its shine had not yet worn off. Among the staff was Rose, who worked in administration because she had not been allowed to study medicine, and who carried herself with the calm of someone raised around sharp instruments and difficult mornings. Her father had been a figure in the city's forensic world, and Rose had inherited both his discipline and, from the chief of the service, his trust. One evening the phone rang near closing. Rose's boss asked her to remain and to keep 2 technicians on as well. A particular body was coming, he said, and he wanted her to receive it personally. That was odd, but not unheard of. What was unheard of was the ambulance that pulled to the door. Ambulances deliver the injured, not the dead. If someone dies en route, the body is handed over at a hospital, not driven straight to the morgue. Yet here was a Green Cross unit, and here were 2 nervous young medics with a thin stack of papers that didn't look like a real file. The sheet from the prosecutor's office ordered delivery of the body but offered little else. A woman, early 30s, possible suicide by barbiturates. No annexes, no chain of custody, almost nothing at all. The technicians wheeled in the stretcher. The woman wore a black dress, elegant but not formal, cut from expensive fabric that felt soft as a sigh under a glove. Her single shoe, its partner missing, was from a brand sold only to the well-off. The manicure was immaculate. In her hair, Rose found the remnants of a crêpe style, fashionable and intricate, the kind of thing one does not do alone. When they rolled the body to take prints, the fingertips were smooth and unscarred by labor. Even with the purpling at the lips and the trace of what convulsions leave behind, she was beautiful in that still, unsettling way that speaks of very recent life. There was also the note. It lay folded in a pocket, forgotten or placed there on purpose, and it was Rose's duty to open what the dead carried. Mother, forgive me for taking this decision. The secret that led me here I carry in my soul. Mine alone. Rose folded it again and tucked it with the shoe, the dress, the small pile of belongings awaiting their inventory. The body would be readied. The autopsy would be clean. They began to unbutton the back of the dress. As they turned the body to reach the last row of buttons, a sound came from the room. so soft at first that the men glanced at one another as if asking a question with their eyes. Then it sharpened. A baby's cry. Rose felt the jolt of anger that comes when rules are broken for no reason. Who would bring a child in here? This was not a place for the living, least of all for an infant. She went to the door, called into the corridor, and then crossed the short distance to the guard station, already rehearsing a scolding. The guard looked honestly confused. He had let no one in, he said. The doors were locked. Rose, bristling, told him that they were hearing a baby crying in the preparation room and that someone had clearly slipped past. The man stood, took his keys, and went with her. Inside, the technicians had stopped working. The cry was fainter now, or perhaps it had moved. Sound in those rooms does strange things. One of the men pointed toward the drawers. Another shook his head as if he had lost the word he needed. Rose walked among the steel handles, opening one and then another, listening. The drawers breathed their ordinary cold. The air smelled of disinfectant and the sweetness of beginning rot. She felt no fear. She was, after all, a woman in her 50s who had seen enough to steel her nerves. But she felt something else. The sense that the room had acquired a center that did not exist before. The guards found nothing. The cry died. For a moment, there was only the hum of the lights. "Let's finish," Rose said, and they returned to the table. D.D. The policeman ran. You can laugh at that if you like. It happens more often than anyone admits. Night does its work on men who believe they cannot be moved. Rose lifted the phone and dialed her boss. She asked, as evenly as she could, why he had permitted someone to enter with a baby. On the other end, she heard him inhale once, then answer in a voice that left no room for debate. "Put the body back as it is. Close the drawer. Leave now. I will see you in the morning." They obeyed. It felt wrong to return a half-undressed body to the cold, but they slid the stretcher, closed the door, killed the lights, and stepped out into the hallway where the night had nothing to say. At dawn, before Rose had finished her first cup of bitter coffee, 2 lawyers in immaculate suits arrived with an order to release the body. A third man, dressed unlike a lawyer, came with them. Rose telephoned the chief. He told her to hand everything over. In the preparation hall, the stranger burned incense, murmured words, and left behind a smell of char and herbs. A prestigious funeral home collected what remained. There were no questions anyone was permitted to ask, and no answers anyone was going to give. When Rose tried anyway, her boss told her softly, "Leave it. They are important people. Some doors you don't open twice." 2 days passed. At dusk, the same ambulance team returned, pale and panicked because their paperwork was incomplete. Rose helped them patch the administrative hole. Compassion is another rule they don't write down. Before she let them go, she asked why they had broken protocol and delivered a corpse directly to the morgue. The older of the 2 told her the story in a low voice. They had been sent to a house in an elegant district. A maid opened the door and pointed the way but did not accompany them. A man in an impeccable suit met them outside the bedroom and told them exactly what to do, handed them the single sheet, and gave them a name to invoke if they encountered trouble. Inside, the room was painted entirely black. There were no windows. On rugs, laid like islands, stood an altar crowded with red and black candles masks they did not recognize, images that were neither saints nor gods they knew, and a framed drawing so ugly in its intent that one of the boys decided never to describe it again. The woman lay to one side, her mouth stained by the mechanics of death. The man in the suit said the body must be taken immediately, and so they did, because sometimes the living make choices that bend everyone else into their will. For some, this is where the story ends, with a wealthy ritual, an explanation that feels like an accusation, and a corpse that moves swiftly through the system. For others, it is where the story begins. The morgue is a place of practical kindness. It answers questions. It assigns names to the nameless. It closes circles for the living, who come and cry and sign their names and leave with a date. The people who work there labor inside a discipline that insists on facts. They also live with an intimacy that most people never face. The smell of blood, the strange sweetness of anaerobic decay, the heft of a body that now weighs only what it weighs. To survive, some build habits of respect. One doctor in Puebla, 20 years at the table, always spoke to the dead before the first cut. "I'm going to work on these remains to learn what happened to you, to help your family understand, to keep enough of you that your identity can be known, so that your time can close." She swore by the ritual not because she was superstitious, but because it steadied her hands and put a boundary around the unspeakable. Once, as she reached for her mask, a moan lifted from the body on her table. She glanced at the technicians who were unfazed. Such sounds happen, and most are simply air and pressure. She tied the mask and reached for her gloves. The sound came again, longer now, the way grief sometimes lengthens into keening. By the third time it carried a hint of shape, like someone trying to sing a single broken syllable. The doctor walked to the head of the table and spoke in the same calm voice she used for her living patients. "Sir, I do not know your name, but I am here to learn what was done to you and what you suffered. I am here to help the people who loved you. Please let us work." One of the technicians, young enough to mistake bravado for courage, asked if she was scolding a corpse. "Yes," she said. "Is that a problem?" And then they did their work, and nothing further broke the silence. Hospitals have their own stories, told in break rooms at the ends of long shifts. At a national medical center, where the dead are stored modestly, and a farewell room permits families a private goodbye, an elderly woman was seen one night by more than one set of eyes. The orderlies, pushing a covered stretcher through a quiet corridor, noticed her first. Gray hair, braided and trailing, a checkered apron, a blue sweater, the stoop of someone who had worked with her hands all her life. That corridor is not for visitors. There is nowhere to wander in from or out to. Still, there she stood. Later, a doctor saw her by the viewing window, and later still the night nurse confessed that she had found the same figure in the room beside the deceased S, gone by the time she crossed the threshold. No name was ever put to the woman, and she never came again. The staff, who had no use for ghost stories, decided to believe the simplest thing. She had come to say goodbye. If there is mercy in the world, perhaps it looks like that. A quiet figure moving through a place that has no space for her, twice seen and then gone. The funeral homes hold still other kinds of memory. A man who had worked the prep room for decades, the kind who cleans without flinching and keeps a secret because it is not his to tell, once described turning to speak to the makeup artist he thought had stepped in behind him. He was washing a young man who had died in an accident, the sort of cruel arithmetic that turns everything bright into iron. There was no answer to his request to wait. When he looked up, a boy with blonde, curly hair stood behind him in sports clothes, sweat curled and alive in the way the dead are not. The worker opened his mouth to scold. "Restricted area. You can't be here." And the space in front of him was suddenly empty. He turned back to the table and found the same face, pale now and uninhabited, on the sheet. He did not run. He said, "Rest. I am sorry you had to leave so soon. I will finish and I will pray." And then he finished. Men who do that kind of work rarely let themselves ask what they believe. It's enough to let the prayer do its part. Explanations are easier to list than to accept. Fear is one, not of hauntings, but of endings. Punishment, emptiness, the unknown. Attachment is another. To a house, a child, a lover, a pile of coins hidden beneath a floorboard. The last is a kind of ignorance, the soul that does not yet understand that its address has changed and lingers by the old door, waiting for someone to open it from inside. After all, people who come back from the edge sometimes say that while their bodies lay still, they hovered above, watched hands and gloves move and mouths speak words they could not hear. Perhaps those who do not come back linger a while longer. Perhaps they return to the places where their names still live on paper labels and stainless steel. Science will not argue with you about gases or reflex arcs. It will correct you if you talk about hair and nail growth after death. A trick of receding skin, not a miracle of keratin. It will show you how to read the lividity in a limb and what the color of a bruise can tell you about the time of an injury. It will hand you, if you ask nicely, a stack of papers that quantifies so much suffering that numbers begin to feel like a kind of mercy. But science will not explain the cry that made seasoned policemen run from a room, or the old woman who appeared and dissolved twice in a hallway designed to have only one exit. It will not explain why a doctor felt better after speaking aloud to a man who could not hear. It does not have to. Not every door in the morgue opens into fact. Some open into the human need to find shape in the dark. Some open into the dark itself. In the end, the work goes on. Families arrive, forms are signed, the dead are identified and released. Sometimes a high wall rises around a case made of influence and secrecy, and the staff are told to forget what they heard. They do, mostly, because the next shift begins and the drawers are never all empty. Respect remains. So does the rule about leaving the dead where they belong, which is, in its way, also a rule about leaving the living where they belong. You do the work. You wash your hands. You close the report and you switch off the light and you step into the hallway where morning smells like coffee and floor polish and something like relief. If you insist on an answer, on whether the dead move or call out or come to collect a final look, few will give you one. Most will shrug and say biology covers almost everything. A few will tell you stories the way you tell dreams, careful not to ask you to believe them. And one or two will say what Rose might have said, that sometimes a room fills with a sound that has no source, that sometimes the powerful make demands that bend rules until they snap, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is tell the empty air that you are here to help, and then keep your promise. Good night. May those who wait for names find them. May those who listen in the dark hear only what they can bear, and may the dead, whoever they were and whomever they loved, rest.